Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my microphone as I step out the door and deliver an episode to you while I walk the dog. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago. The sun is out. The cicadas are buzzing angrily. Hopefully they're not going to dive bomb me too much today, but if they do, as always, I'll put it in as an outtake at the end of the episode. I actually didn't have one last time, which was relatively nice. Rare, but nice. So, I played a handful of stars recently. I'll talk about that on a Board Game Espresso episode as my dusty game. But there was a moment of intense betrayal, maybe, or at least surprise. And it made me want to talk a little bit about games where people negotiate and how those games function, what kinds of things you can expect, and what I enjoy about them and don't enjoy about them. So as I was thinking about it, obviously there are lots of different kinds of negotiation games. In some ways, an auction game might be considered a negotiation game. In some ways, there are games where you literally are negotiating, where you do like business deals. Hey, I'll sell you this for that. Think of like Catan, where you might have a thing that you want and the other person has a thing that they want, and so you negotiate a deal. Actually, that strikes me as the third kind of negotiation game that I did not say. So oh no, I didn't. I did. It's here. So what I wanted to do is talk about, I thought of three different kinds of negotiation games, and I want to talk a little bit about how those games work, what they're like, and again, the things I like or dislike about them. So let's start with economic negotiation games. So I mentioned Catan already. Catan, of course, has a built-in set of economic negotiation needs. Everybody needs a specific set of resources to do things, and you get those by trading resources. There's one dive bomb already. You get those by trading resources with one another. And often you're trying to figure out at what rate you want to trade them so that everybody can get a good deal or get what they want. This is a useful way to approach the question of examples of this other than Catan are games where you might be selling resources to one another, trying to get resources. And perhaps my favorite of those is Sidereal Confluence. Now, Sidereal Confluence is a large player count game. It's really fun with like 6 or more. And in that game, you are trading things with other people. The premise is there's a bunch of aliens. You've come together to have a trading conference. And the whole game is built around the idea of trading things. Most of the game works. Each society has things they need and things they make. And often they don't need what they make. This makes sense, of course. And so what you're trying to do is build up systems where you make things that other people want, so they'll give you the things that you want. And then you have to get into place scoring objectives that allow you to get points. So the game is, if you've ever played Furnace or something like that, where you have a lot of conversion cards where you'll turn 1 iron into 2 steel or something, those are what the engines are like, what the machines are like in Sidereal Confluence. Everybody's got these different machines that convert resources into different resources. And the whole gimmick is that everybody's got slightly different sets of these machines and machines that do slightly different things. And so you negotiate with one another to get what you need. It also has this really clever bit where you research technology and you get it for the round that you created it, and then everybody else gets it the next round. And you get points for being the one who found that technology and shared it with everyone. You don't get to choose not to share it. So the fun thing about Sidereal Confluence in particular, other negotiation games in general, is the idea that you're going to make deals with people. You're going to make plans that involve a variety of different kinds of exchanges. Economic is what I'm thinking here. Now, the big difference in something like Sidereal Confluence over other games like Catan would be that in Sidereal Confluence, any deals you make are binding. If both people agree to the deal, you have to do it. And the game does have in the rules a system for if somehow you make a deal and then you are literally unable to follow through. But the way the game is designed, that's not supposed to happen. And you definitely can't actively choose to do that. And you definitely can't choose to not honor a deal that you made. if it's possible to honor. So like, if you say, hey, if you give me 3 white cubes this round, I'll give you 3 black cubes next round. Then next round you say like, nah, I'm not going to give you those cubes. You can't do that. Sidereal Confluence very specifically does not allow deception or sabotage or like betrayal in the trading part. In fact, at all. There is no way to sabotage or betray somebody. You could just out negotiate them. A game like Catan doesn't really have rules that allow for long-term trades. It doesn't really have a thing where like, if you give me 2 stone now, I'll give you the next 3 wood that I get. I don't know if those are allowed in Catan, or if I haven't looked at Catan's rules to see like, does it let you choose not to follow through on your deal? But I think economic games, particularly I like Sidereal Confluence because it does have the economic negotiation that I find interesting, but it also has very specifically rule set that does not allow for deception, which I like. There's certain times that the big thing for me is I want everyone to be on the same page when it comes to negotiation, and I feel like deception in an economic game violates that in some ways because it becomes hard to know when you're negotiating in good faith and when not, which is, for some games that's part of the way it is. So that's economic negotiation games. I think I've said the good and the bad. I'm trying to think if there are economic negotiation games I actively don't like. I can't think of any, but I honestly haven't played that many. Other than Sidereal Confluence and Catan, I'm having trouble thinking of any that I've played. I'm sure there are some where hey, I'll give you this Monopoly obviously is one, where you can trade properties with people. So that's another one where weighing value is a key part of the game. And then we have 2 other kinds of negotiation. One of the ones I will suggest or offer is, or the next one I'll offer, are games where betrayal is not part of the game, but negotiation and ally building are. In particular, I'm thinking of the game Rex, or as it was originally published and is now available, Dune. So the original Dune game has a goal of getting a certain amount of, each faction has a slightly different way that they win the game, but the game does allow for people to ally, and if you ally, you have to have a sort of different thing to do to win the game, and it's harder. You also get benefits from each other based on trading these ally or cooperation cards. Now, one of the things I like about that game is that there is a specific time in the game when you can make these deals. The game doesn't say like you can just declare yourself an ally of somebody. It says to be an ally, you have to, in this round at this time, do this thing. And then you are allies. You trade ally tokens. And then you are allies until at the very earliest, the next time we have one of those phases, in which case you could choose to stop being allies. The reason I like that is that betrayal is not really part of a thing, although you could, in that second phase, stop being allies, ally with somebody else, and then win the game or something. That does allow for it, but there is a specific time when that could happen, and the other players have equal opportunity to do that. So again, there is a level of deception at play, but the deception comes on even terms in the game. As I think about it, I am not sure that I know of another game other than Rex/Dune that has the arranged ally rules like that, like the ones in Rex and Dune. There probably are some, but I'm not sure that I know what they are. And then we get to the third kind of negotiation and betrayal game, and this is area control games that don't disallow negotiation. And I guess like you couldn't really disallow negotiation. I think about this as I think about like an area control games. I don't know that you can really disallow players from teaming up, from working together, from talking to one another. And different players will approach this process in different ways. That an area control game, because so much of it is about figuring out where you can gain the most control, figuring out how to outwit the other players militarily rather than economically, although economically sometimes is part of it, means that sometimes it will be in your benefit to work with another player against another stronger player. And when that happens, allyships will form. But unlike Sidereal Confluence or even Rex and Dune, if the game doesn't legislate that, then part of gameplay becomes observing and exploring what other game players are doing and figuring out the best way to navigate that space, aware that the game doesn't require you to maintain any kind of truthfulness in what you're saying. And in fact, the game kind of encourages you not to. The biggest classic of this genre, of course, is diplomacy. Diplomacy is a very long, I haven't played it actually. Diplomacy is a very long political and military game set in the 1900s in Europe. And the idea is that you are competing states trying to establish dominance in Europe. That is the whole goal of the game. The game does not allow for a win condition in which people work together. It does not allow for peace among, I'm assuming this all. I actually haven't played diplomacy. Maybe there is a peace among everyone or an alliance win option, but I kind of doubt it. You know, a similar but less hobby game approach would be something like Risk. The game Risk has a similar, you are competing countries from around the world and the goal is to dominate the whole world. You can't decide, no, I'm not gonna try to dominate the world. I mean, you can, but you won't. The game won't end. Either you'll get in a stalemate or you will lose. You can't win without attacking in Risk. I'm not sure how diplomacy works, but I assume it's the same. The game Game of Thrones is a sort of fantasy version of this same model, where you have competing states, royal powers, and a set number of objectives / control points, and you win if you control a certain number of them. When the game is the game in Game of Thrones, there's a time limit too. So if you get to, I think, 7 rounds and somebody doesn't control however many castles you need to win, it depends on player count, then the person who controls the most castles win, and then there's a couple tiebreakers. So you can determine who the winner is on time. But other area control games will have different ways of measuring victory, but often come down to that same thing. And this is actually what inspired this conversation, is A Handful of Stars, which I played recently, as I said. I dusted off, I'd played it before. In A Handful of Stars, you are one of a number of alien races that is trying to spread out through the galaxy, and other alien races are also moving through the galaxy. There are points available for colonies, outposts, and your homeworld. And then there are some limited number of technologies that have points in them as well. So there is a way to sort of strive for a culture victory, but the game doesn't really make all that many points available for it. So it'd be really hard to achieve a culture victory, I think, because there just aren't that many points for it. You would need to have some level of control of a big chunk of the board to win. Because you have the points at the end of the game, you don't get the points in the middle of the game. So, having a colony in the middle of the game doesn't actually get you anything toward winning, except it gets you more resources. And then at the end of the game, you can, you get points for that colony. But if you lose the colony in the second to last turn, that colony didn't give you any points at all. So this is one of the challenges of the game, is the end state is the only thing that matters. And because the end state is the only thing that matters, it reminds me a lot of Game of Thrones. Except that in Game of Thrones, the way the game is set up, it's sort of reminiscent of diplomacy. So the idea that you would be working with other people and talking to them is forefront. In A Handful of Stars, it's certainly possible. The game doesn't say anything about making alliances or making deals with people, but the game also doesn't facilitate that in any way. Anything that people say to one another is just part of gameplay. And this is the place actually where I find this kind of game where there is a value to diplomatic interaction, even when the game doesn't legislate that action, to be the most fraught in terms of my experience. Because often the kind of interaction that the game promotes through its mechanisms isn't a very nice interpersonal action. Diplomacy, Game of Thrones, these are both games that are sort of legendary for the moment that someone betrays someone else. Because if you believe that you're in alliance with someone and then they betray you, that is a real twist. And if you aren't expecting to be betrayed, it's an even bigger twist. And it can be a pretty big feel-bad moment. Now, some people enjoy that kind of moment in a game. They remember it positively. Other people, it is a legitimate feel-bad moment. There's a reason that when they talk about diplomacy, that they talk about it ruining friendships, because it is a game where you make deals with people, you talk secretly with people. In diplomacy, you take people into your confidence, you make notes. There's a whole element to working together, and then at some point somebody springs a betrayal on somebody else, and that's part of how the game works. Game of Thrones is the same way. People work together to establish what they're doing, and often there's a betrayal element as well. So what has regularly happened to me, and this happened in both Game of Thrones and the recent game of A Handful of Stars, is I presume during the game that any deals made are provisional and likely to be betrayed at some point. You know, if somebody says, hey, let's work together on this, I think, great, we will stand together as long as it suits us both, and I'll expect at some point that you'll turn on me. So I never fully open myself up for attack in that kind of game, because the smart move in that situation, at some point you have to turn on your collaborator, particularly if they are the weakest opponent that you have facing you, because the game does not allow you to win with another person. But this is where the really interesting slippage between the magic circle of the game and the real world of feelings is interesting, and sort of can be upsetting, is that people experience real feelings of betrayal in playing the fictitious game, and depending on how dramatically they feel those feelings, resonate beyond the game itself, or really push toward dramatic experience. Now, again, if everybody's on the same page, that's great. I never go into a game of Thrones expecting not to be betrayed. And so when a betrayal happens, if I didn't see it coming, I might feel mad for a little, and then I would feel really impressed by the maneuvering my opponent did. And I assume that everyone else is playing the game in the same way until they're not. And I find that really interesting, and also not my favorite experience, because I really like to play to win. And in a game where you're competing to win, if I feel upset outside of the game because of the actions in the game, even if they're my own doing. I've used this example a number of times. In the game Dead of Winter, there was one time I won as the betrayer because I waited for the optimal moment where it looked like we were all going to succeed, and then I stuck the knife in everybody's back and won the game. And I hated every minute of it. I didn't find it fun. And frankly, from the looks of everybody else around the table, they didn't find it fun either. And this is the really interesting part about competitive games generally, but particularly competitive games that involve an act of betrayal, is that losing isn't fun inherently, but you can play a game and have fun even if you lost. So I'm always thinking about what is it that makes it so you don't have fun when you lose in the gameplay experience. And if you're the person who causes someone else to not have fun because they lost, how does that fit into the gameplay experience? Well, that was a long walk for a short conversation about negotiation games. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. If you have comments on this, head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your thoughts about negotiation games. If you have anything else to share, head over there as well, or send me an email, brendan@rattleboxgames.com, or send me a direct message on Board Game Geek. Wombat929 is my username there. Well, that's about it for me. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye. People work together to... Cicadas all around me.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.